Hello and welcome to Just Follow Joy. My name's Ariana and I'm a human design reader and teacher. And I love making human design accessible and awesome for everyone because I think that it can and should be. So today we are talking about human design, of course, in a way, but it's really more going to be about a different system or a sister system to human design called gene keys. And if you are familiar with human design, if you've been around the block, then I'm sure you've probably heard of gene keys and maybe even dabbled in them yourself. But if you haven't, I'm really excited to introduce it to you in this episode. And we'll talk all about this more in depth, obviously, but essentially what gene keys is this different take on one certain part of human design, the gates. And it is so eye-opening, it's so fascinating that no matter how long you've been on your human design journey, I think that gene keys can really provide some extra juicy stuff that may explain why you experience certain things in certain ways. And it's not necessarily explored, we'll say, in the same way in traditional human design. So there are things that you can get from gene keys that you maybe just wouldn't experience during your time with traditional human design. So I think it's this fantastic resource for really anybody who wants to understand themselves better. And more than that, anybody who wants to really elevate into the gift or the gifts of the gates in their human design chart. And the thing that I'm the most excited about is the person who will be explaining all of this to us, Destiny Rae Swinney. Destiny is a 3/5 reflector, a gene keys and human design guide, a psychic mentor, and multi-chart mystic. Her passion and work in life is around helping people like you better understand yourself and the events of your life through these systems and also through her innate gifts, while bringing you deeper into inner peace, love, and clarity. And who isn't looking for more of that? So that's the profesh bio, but what's not included in that is that Destiny is just one of the funniest freaking people I've met. She's so outspoken, she's so raw and one of a kind. And I love learning gene keys from her. I love hearing about life from the reflector viewpoint. And I just love being around her because she's really, really fun. And I'm really glad I got to share her with you today. So we're going to dive into all of this about gene keys. We're going to talk about what they are, what your hologenetic profile means, understanding the basics, and then we also go into some examples from our own charts so you can see how this works in real time. But before we do, two things. First off, this is definitely an episode where I would recommend going and getting the chart of the system we're talking about. So go to Gene Keys. I'll have the links down in the description or in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on some kind of podcasting platform. I'll put that information below, but it's free at, I think, genekeys.com. And then you can get your hologenetic profile and you can follow along so you can understand what it is we're talking about. The second thing is I never tell people what they should like watch or listen on, but this kind of conversation tends to be more visual. So if you can watch this on YouTube, I would recommend it. If you can't or you don't want to, that's totally fine. You could still follow along just fine. But I am somebody who really benefits from the visuals myself. So if that's the case for you, I'd watch it on YouTube. And then I guess there's actually three things. The last thing is if you like this video or you like this episode and you want to get free human design info on the reg, then make sure to like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to Just Follow Joy because it's one of the best ways to get this information to you regularly, but also to get the show out in front of other people who will like and love it too. So with all that said, let's go talk to Destiny. All right. Okay. So Destiny and I have tried to book this. So if you're not watching the video, she's laughing. We've tried to book this so many times because as soon as I saw her on Instagram, I was like, I know one, I want to get a reading with her. And two, I want to talk to her on the podcast already. I mean, it's so easy to project onto 5 lines, you being a 3/5 and a reflector. So easy, to be like, oh my God, I love you. And you don't know the person. But I was like, I think she has good vibes. I'd really love to connect. And so pretty much immediately I was like, do you want to be on my podcast? And then just for like one reason or another, family members were in emergency rooms, babies were not allowing it, illnesses were not letting it happen, travels abroad God, we're forgotten. Can you guess who that was by? It was by me. And I forgot like entire 3 week trips. But here we are now. And as Destiny likes to remind me, her sun gate is in gate 2, which you can learn through Gene Keys, is the theme of divine timing.
Mhm.
So she always reminds me that it's going to come together when it should. And so right now is exactly when it should. I think there is no better time. And I'm so happy to have you here, Destiny.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I love that your mom's text before was just like
Oh God, that was so
the
funny.
cutest little nudge of like, yes, divine timing.
Yeah, because even today you were like, hey, like I know that we're meeting at 2:30. Is it okay if we meet at 3? And I was like, I can't because I need to go do something for my parents after like at like 3:45. I have a hard stop. And literally right after I texted you that, there was a text I hadn't checked from my mom because I immediately was responding to you first. And she was like, actually, we could do it on Sunday instead. So like, don't worry about it today. And I texted Destiny. I was like, okay, 3 p.m. Here we are. All come together for us to hear about the Gene Keys from Destiny and her experience with human design and Gene Keys and all of her magical wisdom as a reflector. So, to start off, would you mind giving us a brief idea of what Gene Keys actually is?
Yeah, yeah. So Gene Keys is essentially, I like to call it like a sister system of human design. It's founded by Richard Rudd. He studied with Ra Uru in the early days and then eventually broke off and created his own system through his own divine download, similar to Ra. The Gene Keys are founded, like their foundational basis is just like the gates in human design. It comes from the I Ching, and it's just basically like Richard Rudd's updated, channeled, meditated, I don't know, updation, like basically updation, is that a word? I don't think that's a word.
It is now.
It is now updation, destinyisms is what my partner likes to call them. Updation of the gates and or the Chinese I Ching. And so one of the things that I really love about it and why I've kind of become a fangirl of it and why I kind of tend to put a little bit more focus and lean on the Gene Keys is just because for me, as a reflector in human design, I always found that the gates were the most important thing for a reflector to understand. Like we can go over just the foundational basics of charts that people like to go over, strategy, authority, profile, all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't really help a reflector. What I found helped me in my journey and then clients and just people whom I worked with in the reflector community that I'm close with is really understanding the gates to understand like, okay, if I am supposed to be nothing and everything, well then how the fuck do I figure out what is me and what is not me? Where do I go? Right? Like the undefined G center, and I'm a sphinx. So it's like everything in my life has been about who am I? Where am I going? What is my purpose? And human design will laugh at me and tell me that like, oh, you're never going to know that. But I actually can when I look at the nuanced understandings and layers in my gates. And, you know, having the gate 2, which is the gate of higher purpose and direction, and is literally the driver of the entire chart in human design makes it quite funny that I'm like, who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? What is the purpose of all of this? And so, yeah, so I found Gene Keys to be the one thing that not only helped me understand myself, and understand the gates in human design so much more deeply, but it's the one thing that also helped me to assess my connection with the program, with the transit. So I've never been somebody who's ever tracked the transits, like how a lot of people will tell a reflector to do. I've tried numerous times in my physical body and like my mind, it just won't allow me to do it. It becomes too mental. I forget. I literally can't remember to do it. And it just doesn't land for me in my body. But when I started studying the Gene Keys, it gave me such a precise language. Now, granted, there's a lot that you can read in one Gene Key, which is alluding to why you and other people feel confused by it when you read it and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know, my fifth line body is like, yes, like I love this. And also, there is so much information written within one Gene Key entry that is just not the necessary practical foundational information that you really need to know. So I always suggest highlighting those key parts. Practical tip for anybody. But anyway, that reading that I was able to read it and be like, what the fuck, Richard Rudd? Like, you are calling me out. This is like word for word when you get to the good parts. It's like word for word what I'm experiencing in my life or what I'm feeling.
Mm.
And the fact that, coming from studying human design for a few years before I found Gene Keys, and, I'm sure you and other people have run into like the information and the gates, the channels, all of it within human design can a lot of the times be quite negative. It can be very
Mm.
shadowy, right? It's not very promising. It's not like it just doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth most of the time, right? And it can make a lot of people feel like shit about themselves and feel very limited. But when I read the Gene Keys, I loved the fact that it's like, yes, here's the shadow, right? Here's like what it's going to be like when it feels like shit, when it's really difficult. But then here is the gift in that. Like this is not happening to you. It's happening for you. Like you're not a victim of this. Like this is the raw potential of this energy that then is able to be tracked through, okay, we're going to move out of the gift and we're going to go, or we're going to move out of the shadow and see what the gift of this is. And then once we get to the gift, now we can go, okay, this is like the gift of the earthly plane, but oh, it can also be taken higher. It can be taken higher into this aspect where now you feel this connection to something larger than yourself. And you can track your journey and you can track this energy in such a way where even if you are like, yeah, I'm in the shadow, you can read that and you can continue to read on. And at least for me, it gave me a pathway. It gave me navigational tools and a language to understand where I was going and what I would be looking for, what I would be looking to feel and or experience when I could recognize and go, oh, okay, now I've transmuted this, right? Or if I'm looking at somebody, as a reflector, if I'm experiencing some kind of energy, now I have this language programmed within me to the point where I'm like, this is, X gate. And this is the shadow of that. And so this is what it is. And I can approach that person. I can approach the transit. I can approach life so much more from a place of wisdom and compassion because I have the language to understand what is going on in the world, in me, and in other people. And so for me, that is the value of Gene Keys, and why I love it so much. So I hope I just answered your question in that very long-winded response.
You did, and more, luckily. The first thing I wanted to say is it's funny because you actually answered a question I had about reflectors and the gap that this can fill for your energy type, because human design really comes from a place of everything that you're not as a reflector. You are not certain. You are not emotionally consistent. You are not built to deal with stress in consistent ways. You don't know your direction. By the way, talking about I hate to say this to you, Destiny, but looking at your human design chart, I am kind of like, this is a joke because you have every gate in your G center, which is about direction and identity, or almost every gate,
Yeah.
activated. She has like the fact that Destiny is a reflector is actually crazy for how many gates she has defined in her G center, having it still be undefined. And so there is like, it would be so unsurprising to me that actually, I feel like I've texted you about this before. I was like, what's going on here? That pressure to find that direction and who you are, that is so prevalent for so many reflectors that I hear from, but it would make so much sense for you. And it is funny too, that like a lot of human design does kind of feel like it's laughing at you, like, especially when you hear it from Ra's perspective, because that guy did not give a fuck. Like Destiny and I have talked about this before. You are one of the few people I know who actually says like what they think about a lot of stuff that Ross said. Everybody else is like too scared. And I get it, like one day people are probably going to come for me and be like, you didn't know him. But I'm like, yeah, but also, are you reading this? Um,
This
and
is
so
the
that
gift,
it makes
gift
a
of being a fifth line reflector.
yeah, yeah. And so that all makes sense. And the other thing that I wanted to say that you touched on and what I really like about Gene Keys is that very clearly laid out concept that if you're in the shadow of this thing, it doesn't mean it's because you're like programmed to be in this shadow. It doesn't mean that you can't elevate your frequency and experience this in a much more profound and beautiful way and helpful way. And not only that, but what I really, and we'll probably dive into this, but I don't want to spoil anything. But in Gene Keys, one thing I really like is that Richard Rudd says, like, that is the goal actually, is to get to that higher expression of it. It's like human design is great, but Ra like never really took responsibility of saying, like, we're going to get to this golden age by like he was like, I don't know, up to you guys. This is just how you're built, which is like fair. That was kind of his job, right? He wasn't here to like inspire people. He was just here to be a messenger. But with Gene Keys, like Richard really focuses on the fact that when we live in the shadow or the gift or the city, whatever, of Gene Key, then it's actually like it's because it's not just us experiencing that. It's like the world is kind of in that. And so when we transmute that, then we actually transmute it for the world. And that's something that I took from Gene Keys and I bring to human design, which is like not a part of human design, which is probably why I seem overly positive about it to some people who like study traditional human design. But yeah, that I agree with all of that. And it's been a positive influence for me too.
Yeah.
But speaking of, human design and then Gene Keys, how did you come across both? And like what was your experience with both?
So my experience started with human design at the end of 2015. I had a spiritual online friend, and I called him up one day to ask him some advice around me starting a business at the time. And he brought up human design, 'cause of course was like, knowing this could essentially help you in this journey of trying to start this business.
Wait, sorry, what was the business? I really want to know.
It was a vegan chocolate like dessert company.
Oh, that's so cool.
Not very wrong, but
How Jenna Zoe of you.
gotta start somewhere. Yeah, and he had a chocolate like mushroom business, lived out in California. It was a total hippie. So anyway, so he tells me about it and I give him my birth information. He pulls my chart while I'm on the phone with him and he's like, "Holy fuck, you're a reflector." And I was like, "Bert, what?" And so he's like, "You're the 1%. You're so rare. Oh my God, this is so cool. You have to talk to my friend Ben and get a reading from him. I've only ever met one other reflector and it's actually his fiance. So I'm going to pass him along to you." So, or whatever, reverse, pass you along to him. So the following day, or, sometime shortly after that, I get on the phone with this complete and total stranger. And I spend 8 hours on the phone with this guy for the first time as he's diving into my chart and we're talking about all these things. And I'm just like mind blown. Like, what the fuck? How do you know all of this? Like, I had always wanted to visit a psychic and have them tell me all of these things about me, right? Like, hello, undefined G center, but super defined.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know about myself. I want to know who I am amongst everybody else. And I felt like that's what he was in that 8 hour long, ridiculous phone call was like, I'm like, you were like a psychic. You were telling me things that you should not know. So I was immediately obsessed. We had like two more follow on calls the next night, just like hours and hours of talking. Ended up being friends temporarily. And it was like from that moment on, like I remember after that phone call, calling up the original friend and being like, what the fuck? Like, why is this not everywhere? Why are we not using this in like doctors' offices and schools and like all of this shit? Like the world needs to know this, right? Like the fifth line kicks
I
in.
was about to
It needs
say
to
the
be
fifth line.
universalized. This needs to be universalized. Oh my gosh. So I was like obsessed with it. However, I was not at a place in my life where I could really go much farther than understanding what, basically taking what he had given me during all of those hours, which I did. And I, contemplated as best I could. And then it wasn't until I think 2017 when it came back in and I bought the definitive book of human design and read about being a reflector and was like, like as that book is for the first time anybody ever reads it without knowing anything, right? I was like, okay, interesting. Set it back down for probably like another 9 months. And then finally in 2018, I was like, I gotta know some stuff about my boyfriend. And so I started digging in and it basically kind of spiraled out from there. And so I've been studying it since 2018, obsessed with it ever since, started doing client readings like right away so I could third line it and like figure it out like in action. And then I think it wasn't too long after that. I think it was in 2019, through some Facebook groups that I heard about Gene Keys. And so I was interested, very much interested because somebody basically said like, it's essentially the same thing. It's just the gates, right? Everything that I had just said about it. So I got it, read the book, was mind blown, was like similar feeling to how I felt when I read the human design book for the first time, but there was an immediate difference that I felt with it. And it gave me, like I said, it gave me so many more answers with it. So yeah.
So when we look at a Gene Keys map, It is not as weird looking to me as a human design chart is, but it is still a little funky. It kind of reminds me of those structures that you used to play on as a kid. Do you know which ones I'm talking about? That like they look like half a soccer ball and they
Yeah,
have
it's like
like
a little
metal
dome and it
bars.
like connects.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So what exactly is this structure like? What does it represent overall?
If you look at the hologenetic profile, which is what Gene Keys calls their profile, it's this like rendition of what the Kabbalah is, right? Which is where
Mm.
that kind of comes from. And I know the Kabbalah, Tree of Life, whatever, like that's a part of human design as well. But other than that, like within that, it is so much less technical and kind of confusing in that sense of like, yeah, there is no body graph, there are no channels. You do have to like see, okay, what does this pathway mean? And so what you're seeing are spheres, and then you're seeing these lines that connect the spheres. And then each of those lines that connects two spheres is called a pathway. And so there's multiple pathways within it, but we've got like, there's three different main sequence of pathways. So we have the genius sequence, which is going to be like, you looking at it like this, it's like they create a diamond on the very outside. And that's your incarnation cross. It's your sun and your earth gates on both sides. And then you move upwards, kind of like a snake in the middle. It'll be red spheres if you see it on the profile, and that's called the Venus sequence. And so that takes your design Earth, your design Moon, your conscious Venus, conscious Mars, unconscious Venus, unconscious Mars. And that creates the Venus sequence. And that Venus sequence is all about reopening your heart. It's about being in relationship. There's some karma and dharma play in there. There's understanding your mental intelligence, your emotional intelligence, your spiritual intelligence or inner child, and then your core wound or your vocation. And then you've got a set of blue triangles basically at the top where you've got 4 spheres. And those are the Pearl sequence. And that is your design Mars, design Jupiter, conscious Jupiter, and then it connects up to your design Sun. And that creates the Pearl sequence, which is all about really bringing out the natural place of abundance. It kind of moves deeper into purpose as well, bringing about abundance and prosperity and expansion, because of course it correlates to Jupiter, and Jupiter is expansion. So that's what you're looking at. So I really love looking at the Gene Keys profile for those, like going into those specific areas, because you don't have all of the gates that you have defined in your human design chart. And I do believe that all of the gates that you have defined in your human design chart are important as well. And so that's why I work with both human design and Gene Keys, apart from also looking at the body graph, is because I want to look at all of those Gene Keys that you have in all of the planets. But we can look at the Gene Keys profile to kind of like go into those very like kind of specific areas, right? Like, okay, are you wanting to know about your purpose? Like, okay, well then we're going to look at the Genius sequence. Are you wanting to know about relationship? Like, are you needing to do some work there? Okay, well, we're going to look at the Venus sequence. Are you wanting to know about your career and getting more money and getting in alignment with that? Okay, cool. We're going to look at your Pearl sequence, right? So I do appreciate the practicality and the efficiency that profile can create for those kind of 3 main pivotal life points in people's life.
Yeah, that was one of the things I really liked about it too. And I being, the entrepreneurial gal that I am, I have definitely dove more into like the Pearl sequence, and then also just my incarnation cross, because or the Genius sequence as well, because that's really been a major thing for me. So when we're looking at the Genius sequence, we have those themes that come from the gates of our incarnation cross. Those represent slightly different things in the Genius sequence. So when we're talking about gate 2, or the second gene key being your sun gate, that's what we would call your life's work sphere in the Genius sequence. And so what do the others represent? The conscious earth, unconscious sun, and earth.
So our personality sun is life's work or brand, because when it switches into the Pearl sequence, it becomes our brand. Then our personality earth is our evolution, and the pathway between those creates our greatest challenge. So essentially balancing the two is kind of where our greatest challenge lies. And then the design earth is our radiance, what keeps us healthy and the kind of energy that we like shine and radiate out of us. And then our design earth is our purpose. And the pathway between that is our core stability. So the balance between those two is what keeps us grounded, what keeps us healthy, and what keeps us, grounded in our essence, in our health, and in our purpose, and like why we came here, what we came here to do.
Okay, cool. So we've talked a little bit about how there are three different aspects to a gene key. So, or three different like stages, right? So can we talk a little bit more about that? Because there are three, there's the shadow, the gift, and then the city. And the city is shown as something that we're like kind of meant to aspire to, but to me, it's also to put in your words of what you said about Richard Rudd once, like he really is just going on his own journey with these, like, and we don't know what they mean all the time. So can you explain the difference between these?
Yeah. So the shadow is really like the raw essence. Like if you think about like, like a diamond that you just mined out, right? That's still covered with all the coal or what the fuck ever it's covered with. It's really like it's the seed, it's the raw kind of gem at the root of it. It is really like if you want to put a spin of negative or positive, like it is quote unquote the negative or the darker or just the unrealized raw essence and energy of that gate, right? So like your 56, for example, the distraction. That is a raw essence of what the city even of intoxication is like, to be completely intoxicated, to be completely just like in the like, I mean, what happens when you're like intoxicated? Like you kind of lose yourself, right? Like you're just kind of in the moment and you're throwing yourself into your senses. And so the distraction, like that is the raw energy and essence. And I would like to just use this as an example to give more practical understanding of it. Like the distraction that he talks about, is like we can go to a glass of wine, we can go to a slice of cake, we can go to, a joint and be like and partake in that thing, and it's truly a distraction from our life. Like we're utilizing our senses as a way to distract ourselves from something else that is going on within us that we don't want to experience and really be sitting with. And we can, even bring in the 60 of like, if you're feeling super fucking limited, like, people in poverty, for example, like if they're super limited in what they can do in their life, so often what happens, they turn to drugs or they turn to alcohol as that distraction away from the harsh realities that they're living in. And so that's kind of like, that shadow aspect of it, how it presents in a way that it doesn't always feel or, express itself as being healthy. But when we move into the gift, which is enrichment. So we move from a place of distraction. Okay, so I'm turning to this glass of wine or this slice of cake or this joint as a distraction away from something, versus when we move into the gift, when we start to kind of pull out of that shadow aspect of it, it's enrichment. And so I can go like, okay, like having a glass of wine, sitting down at dinner with girlfriends or a lover, and I'm just like, I'm in this moment where I'm like, God, just like this wine tastes so good and it feels so great to be alive in this body right now, and my company feels amazing. Like I'm having a really good time. This is something that is really enriching my life and my experience right now, versus the distraction of I'm going to go down a bottle of wine because I just got broken up with and I don't want to feel the feelings that I'm feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so we move then from that gift where we're really starting to assess in our lives. And again, this is just a practical example. Please understand that there's 64 different ones, but we're moving from that place of like, okay, I'm going to understand, like, is this actually, am I trying to distract myself right now? Right. And so we're always going to be able to look back, even when, if we find ourselves in the gifts completely, like one of the things that he says is there can be so often where we do kind of dip back into that shadow, right? So it's not just like a black and white. You may not always be in the shadow. You may have moments where you move into the gift. And then even if you move into the gift primarily, sometimes you'll drop back into the shadow. But so that's going to give us that language and that dance to understand, okay, where am I at right now? What is the health that I'm expressing this energy in? And so when we're in the gift, like he actually says in the book that the gift is where we should aspire to, because the city is kind of like almost like godly type, or if you want to put it like 5D, like higher, whatever, right? Like it's energy that he kind of says, and I think it's like similar to Richard or to Raw, where it's like, listen, like just chill in the gift, like worry about the gift, like don't try to worry about these like higher vibrational things, because like being a fucking human's hard. Like it might actually not, like you might actually not get there in this lifetime, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. It doesn't mean anything bad about you. But that moving from the gift into the city is into that really like that highest expression of it. And I've experienced or quote unquote unlocked cities so many times, and I think there's some of them that I do live in more frequently now. But the cool thing is like they seem so otherworldly and like so godly in a sense, but then when you experience them, you're like, oh, like they actually are just kind of normal in a way, and like
Mm.
sometimes they do get quite divine and they can express that way. um but yeah, that's kind of how you move through them. And so the gift is really like, for anybody who's working with the gene keys, like I would say like focusing on the shadow and the gift is where you're going to spend most of your time. Like if especially if you really find yourself in the shadow, and or you're somebody who deals with a lot of confusion or whatever, or sometimes like can beat yourself up and just make the process a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Like maybe just don't even look at the city,
Yeah.
you know?
Luckily, I'm someone who has never aspired to be enlightened. Like, it was funny when I got into the spiritual community and I was like, y'all really care about this.
Yeah.
I was like, I just want to be happier. But yeah, so I've never luckily concerned myself too much with the city. And I guess maybe that's a good thing, right? I have wondered, definitely in my life, like, it's funny because I think a lot of people who don't define themselves as spiritual at all or don't get up in the woo at all, I seem really on the edge. It's hilarious to me how many people I talk to about human design, they're like, and they legitimately think I'm psychic or like a witch or something like that. And we are all intuitive, but I'm like, I am so far in the shallow end compared to some people who have had literal ego death. Like it's so funny. So I've never really gone to it to that degree, but I would love to talk about one of these sequences for you. Like, I'd love to hear about how this has played out for you. And then we can talk a little bit about mine because I'm excited and I have you here and I want to use you. So,
Okay.
but yeah, so let's talk about, for example, your genius sequence.
Okay.
So you have that conscious sun in two, and because I have your chart up here, just like a great human design reader. You have your conscious sun in two, you have your conscious earth in one, your unconscious sun in 13, and then your unconscious earth in seven, and you have that cross of the Sphinx, right? So all about showing people direction. And she's so good at it, by the way. Like if you want a Gene Keys human design combo reading, definitely go to Destiny. This is what she does. She's here to show the way, right? Sometimes apparently to people who aren't ready, but if you are ready, you can pay her for that.
I was gonna say pretty much everybody who pays me, they are ready. They might not know what they're getting into, but they're always ready. Like it's
Yeah.
that two, yeah, my life's work being in the two, which is like I said, that divine timing, it's the divine feminine, it's orientation, higher self, like everything always happens in divine timing. And so there can be times where we schedule a million different times, reschedule a million different times with sessions with people, but it's like one of the cool things that I've seen throughout is that like there always is that aspect of divine timing. And it's so cool when the client can also be like, okay, listen, honestly, I was getting a little frustrated at either myself or at you because we had to reschedule a couple of times, but this thing happened. And if this thing hadn't happened, the information you're giving me now wouldn't be landing like how it's landing and wouldn't have the impact that it has. And I'm like, yes. So that like that has been so fucking cool to see play out in terms of that divine timing. And it also comes through with like messages from the higher self, like as the reflector, being able to be in that space. Like there are things that I end up saying to people in the session that like yes, sometimes it's from a gene keys, but other times like shit just comes out of my mouth and I'm just like I don't know, I'm supposed to say this to you, and so I say it to them and they're like, what? And so it's like, yeah, that was like a message from your higher self. Like, I have no fucking ego in this. Like, I'm really not trying to be like, oh, I've got a message from your higher self. But like, I've just learned trial and error through enough times that like your higher self will speak through me and say shit and do things. And it is what it is.
And you
So
feel
that's
this
been,
comes from that second gene key?
yeah, that, yes. And, sometimes it is too, because like so often what I'm doing in my work as well, like that 2.3 in general too, like I'm helping people to understand the higher purpose to the experiences that they have in their life. I'm helping them to see their past, and this is that 13 there, right? I'm helping them to see the impact, fifth line in the 13, the impact of that their past has had on them, and like the juice and the higher purpose that is there. And then I help like reframe and recalibrate and reorient them, right, with that gate two, to being in alignment with their higher self and their higher path through kind of like cleansing that field and reorienting, so that way they no longer feel like a victim to their past or a victim to the future or like uncertain, right? Because there's clarity that can come. Like if you look at my my vocation or my core wound 61.1, like having this like these knowings come through and like this clarity that I can bring. And then the 64 pearl that I have is like these chunks and these downloads of information that I just give, or these visual images that I give to people that end up bringing this like little package of information to people as well. And I like my pearl being in 59.5, that transparency and the power of it. Like one of the coolest things that I've witnessed is what happens when I'm just really fucking honest with people, and the power that comes through that and the intimacy that can come through that when I am honest. And it's also really cool because like I've gone throughout this journey, and I love talking to people now about the 59.6 channel because of that 59 that I have, of like going on the journey of my youth where it's like intimacy was gotten in some other ways, just like you get it where you could. And now it's transmuted into this sense of like intimacy in terms of just like openness and honesty and being able to see another person so transparently and so raw. And then like the power that happens when you are honest about something. And sometimes that comes through like those reflections where like I'm feeling something and I'm honest about it. And they're like, God damn, like, thank you for saying that. Like, I've been feeling it. I didn't want to say anything, or like, that's just the truth. And like, that I've needed to hear. Like I've been dishonest with myself, or I've been dishonest with you or somebody else. And um, yeah, you asked me about some of my placements, and I just told you about a whole lot.
You did, and I loved it. And so for you, so you have that you have one in the sorry, you just said all of them, but you have one as your conscious earth.
Mhm.
And so what has that experience been like for you, having like the gift of the creative, the self-expression, the individual as being that aspect of your genius sequence?
Yeah, and it's also the divine masculine. And the third line, it's keynoted by energy and experience. And so it's like it's all encompassing. It's so fun when you break it down, because you're like, it's this and it's this and it's this and it's this.
Mhm.
So like when you pull your profile on the Gene Keys website, it'll give you like 4 different paragraphs, like breakdowns for each one of those 4 placements for your genius sequence. And when I pull mine for that one of the things it talks about is like you're never in control of the creative process. And then if you read the gate 1, like you'll read that too. I call it the manifestor gate, because when you read the Gene Key 1, it's like that's literally what like manifestors experience, because it is this like this creative cycle that you move through that can look tangibly, legitimately like a creation, or it can look like moving through, because it's within the individual circuitry of gene keys, it can look like deep melancholy and entropy, which is what the shadow is, where it's like you feel just kind of like pulled away from life. Like you don't have energy, you don't have it, there's no creative juices flowing. Like you just feel like, ugh. And for me, like that has created very long, amongst other things, but very long seasons of depression when I didn't know what that was. And I tried to understand it, and I tried to label it, and I tried to turn it inward on myself of like, why the fuck do I feel this way? What is wrong with me? Like, I love the Gene Keys and what he talks about in there because of that, because that that hits me so hard to my core. And every single person whom I talk to that has that gate or that has a lot of individual circuitry, I use that gate and what he talks about in there to talk about that melancholy and to be like, hey, like, please do not try to explain this away to yourself. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to do anything with it. Just fucking be, surrender, right? Like the 2 and the 1, those gates are programming partners. And one of the things that I love and that I I plan to actually teach soon is working with their programming partners more distinctly, because they're 2 sides of the same coin. You cannot separate the programming partners out. They are the same energy, just it's like the 2 faces of the moon. We only ever see one face, but there is the other side. And so even if you have, and this is why I love the Gene Keys too, because he brought in the idea of the programming partners going further beyond just the nodes and just the sun and the earth. And so when we look at any one of our gates, we need to understand that there is like that flip, that dark side of the moon energy happening too. Sometimes we also have that programmed and sometimes we don't, but we're always going to experience that energy. And so even within that gate 1, with that creative, like when somebody is in that sense of melancholy or that sense of like, there is just no sense of creativity here. Like, I just feel kind of dry, like, ugh, nothing's happening, right? Like the creator's block, like then that is when you're kind of like, okay, cool. Well, I need to lean into this divine feminine energy. I need to lean into this divine timing and this essence of surrender and simply open and wait to receive and wait for that cycle to complete itself and the freshness to come. And like one of the examples that he gives in that one, which I really love, is like what happens when you plant a seed. Like you plant a seed, you put it beneath the earth, it's dark, there's nothing happening seemingly for so long, like you're watering it every single day. And if you take this with your mind, why is nothing happening? Why is this not growing? It takes time, right? Like the divine timing of it all. But eventually that seed will sprout and you will see what was kind of germinating beneath the soil. And so now that I understand that, thanks to the Gene Keys teaching, every single time one of those moments happen, I get actually so fucking excited. And I'm like, yes, yes, finally, there's change on the other side of this. There's something new. There is something fresh. And I get so excited because I know what that melancholy now represents. I know that there is some level of fresh essence on the other side of it that I'm going to be able to use, whether it's creatively for my business or it's just like this freshening of myself as a person and who I am. And I've moved through something or I've now become something more. So that's what my experience of the one is.
I love that. Yeah. And we didn't really touch upon the unconscious gates, but I do want to talk about programming partners for a second, just for anyone listening. What she's talking about is essentially a programming partner is when you look at a gate in your incarnation cross, the programming partner for your sun gate is going to be your earth gate, and it's always going to be, she's making the cross, it's always going to be the gate that's across on the rave mandala. So when you look at your unconscious sun and unconscious earth, the same thing is going to happen there. So for me, gate 56 is across the rave mandala from gate 60. And so when the line from 32 to 42 and 56 to 60 meet in the middle, it looks like a cross. So because that ray, that line, that's what makes the incarnation quote unquote cross. That's what a programming partner is. It's, as Destiny has explained to me before, it's basically like the energy that is in a way complementary to the other energy. It can seem opposite. It can seem like it has something in common. For me with 32 and 42, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second, but it doesn't feel exactly the same as like the difference between 1 and 2, which are what is in Destiny's chart, because those seem like real, like masculine and feminine. Those are exactly what we know as polarity, as exact opposites of each other, right? 32 and 42 aren't exactly the same way. But what's funny is when you were talking about this, I was like, oh, I actually kind of can see overlap between gate 2 and gate 1 in a way that I never really thought, because gate 2 is also kind of about, at least from the human design perspective, trusting that like, even if you don't see things physically appearing before you right now, you still trust the direction and know that these things can come together, even if you're not seeing them on the concrete physical plane. And with gate 1, it's because it has those like dips in between being creative. It's like, I have to trust, even though I'm not seeing it right now, something is coming together. So that's cool. I've really never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, so one of the things that that actually made like this click into place and made me really see this so much more clearly was when I was like going down the rabbit hole of like why the fuck are the gates in the placements that they are, and nobody could tell me, and I finally figured it out myself. But if you look at like, so when we're looking at the Rave Mandala, you'll see the hexagrams that go along with every single one. And each hexagram is built from a yin or broken line, or a yang or solid line. And so when the two and the one, like why that's so easy to understand too, is because that's literally the foundation for everything.
Mm,
Like two and one create all of the other gates. It creates all of the other hexagrams, right? Like the prime yin and prime yang, like that is the very essential foundation of everything in existence, is some combination of that. And that's what you see when you go around the mandala. But what I found out was through investigating the quarters and looking at through the quarters, is when you look at, so if we go from the two and the one, if you look at the top half starting from the one and then going counterclockwise, that half of the mandala, everything is foundationally based in a yang line. Then
mm,
everything underneath of that, starting from the two, then back to the one, is foundational in a yin line. So it's literally the yin and yang sign, like that the little like squiggle with the dots that you see. Like it's literally
mm,
the mandala, and the energy that it creates is literally the yin and yang sign. So
mm,
it is primarily yin on one side and primarily yang on the other. And so within that, like when you then look at any of the programming partners, what you're looking at is a yin expression and a yang expression of those two energies.
mhm,
And so then when you take that, like I then was like, okay, like this is like the infinity sign, right? Like those two energies, like they're two sides of the same coin, but then it makes like an infinity sign. So there is this constant ebb and flow back and forth that is happening, like that infinity sign, between the programming partners. So that's why I'm saying, like, even if you don't have a programming partner defined in your chart, you will be experiencing that programming partner to
yeah,
some degree.
yeah,
And
that's
in
so
order to
fascinating.
find balance with that energy, sometimes, like if you're working with one of your gates and you're like, I cannot for the life of me, like get this shit under control. Like I can't figure it out. I can't raise the frequency of it. What I have found is usually you need to actually look at the programming partner to bring balance into that, and to see like the actual full blown like the full picture of what that energy is trying to create. When you have just one half of it, you don't have the full picture.
Mm. That is so fascinating. And I love that. And I'm actually remembering that you probably said that during our reading, but I really just thought of it in terms of the incarnation cross, because that's the only place like, or the nodes, right? Because that's where you can see it's always going to be that
Yeah.
opposite or that programming partner gate.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fascinating. Um, and so when you look at my incarnation cross, for example, so let's say, so I have my life work in 32, and then I have my conscious earth in 42, my radiance or my unconscious sun in 56, and then my unconscious earth in 60. I don't want to be pumping you for free Gene Keys readings, but I know what this means for me from a human design perspective.
Mhm.
And I know a little bit about this from a Gene Keys perspective. But if you were to like give me a sentence about this, like what comes to you? Or maybe I'm putting you on the spot.
Hmm. So this is where I also really value bringing in deeper astrology
Mm,
information, because I don't have that chart that has your astrology information. You may know it off the top of your head, but like that is where looking at the houses that you have your
mm,
gates in are going to bring a depth of nuance that is like super, super helpful, right? Because I can look at your conscious sign and be like, okay, this is the gate of preservation. It's the gate of failure. It's the gate, I forget, it's preservation, it's failure, preservation, and veneration.
mm,
I think is what the city of it is. And then 42, which is my Mercury, which is expectation, detachment, and celebration. So a lot of like what the 32, can be about, especially since it's in the tribal circuitry, like it does correlate to money. It correlates to our existence on the tribal plane and how we feel about um our ability to generate money, our ability to move up, right? Because that whole channel, the 32. And like, this is where, too, I don't like just looking at gene keys because I want to go, okay, cool. 32 has a relationship to 54, right? Because they're in the same
Mhm.
channel. And that full channel is all about moving up the social ladder. And it's also about moving up the spiritual ladder. So then I would ask you like, okay, and this is where like in a session, and I'm sure I did, but like in the session, it'd be like, okay, like where do you struggle with failure the most? Like, what does failure mean to you? Where do you experience failure most in your life? And because
Mm.
I want to, I'm going to ask you that question and then I'll dive more in.
Well, can I first give you information astrologically about where this is located?
Uh-huh.
Because then my answer will make so much sense to you.
Uh-huh.
So, I have my sun in Libra in the 10th house.
Okay.
Yeah, which is for anyone
Correct.
listening, career,
Yeah.
fame, fortune in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and absolutely, that is where I at least take failure the hardest. Like
Mhm.
when I this is the funny thing I've never really related to in terms of being a Libra. Like, I love my friends, but like relationships failing, it's just never been a big thing for me. I've never been like, wow, I am a failure because this friendship or this romantic relationship didn't work out. I'm
Mhm.
like, Saya the fuck Onara, bye. And but if I don't hit like career goals, I'm like, well, where's the shovel for me to dig my own grave? Like, it's very different. So that's a really interesting take that I haven't heard before. And one of the reasons why I just astrology and human design combined is I think so powerful. But yeah.
Yeah, and then we also can look at like Libra and Aries and go, okay, what house they normally correlate to. Like Libra and Aries, the ruler is the first and the seventh house. So like that's all about our relationship to self and others. So if I'm like, okay, you've got 32.5 in Libra, which is about others, in the 10th house, which is about career and legacy. And then you have a fifth line, which is here to serve and to help. Well, I want to know, how do you feel about failure in terms of your career and your ability to show up and to be that leader and to help, and or you against, and how you can serve against other people in the
Mm.
community.
Oh my
Like
God,
that
you
kind
just
of.
nailed this. Wow. That is so, it's funny because you can see this like coming from different perspectives, but the cohesive way you just pulled that out of your booty, that was so incredible. That just hit the nail on the head. Like, I think that my answer is when I don't feel I am serving and showing up and like being the star, but not just for myself, like for other people, that is when I'm failing people. So it's not just like when I'm not hitting financial goals. Because again, the 10th house, I guess can be about fortune, but it's really more about like fame, front facing, like being out
Mhm.
in public. That's when I start to feel like I'm not doing as hot. Like when somebody else is seen for something more than me, and I'm not even really phrasing this correctly. Like, how do I say this? When, for example, I saw a podcast episode that came out recently with someone who has like a really highly rated human design podcast. And I immediately was like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not that person? And I know underneath, it's not because I have this I need to be in the spotlight all the time. But it's because I'm like, if I don't get seen, like how I know underneath it's like, how am I supposed to like fulfill my purpose? How am I supposed to help all these people? And then I start feeling really like a failure if I'm not hearing that I'm helping people. And I'm like, this isn't like, what's the point of this? Like, I'm failing at this, right? Like, it also explains why a lot of my fears with gate 32 of failing are like, I'm going to do all this work and it's just like not going to go anywhere. It's not going to reach people. It's not going to have the impact that it wants. Like that's something I've been seeing more and more in my life. So yes, that is what I
Yeah,
see.
so something that I was thinking about when you were saying that, and just like thinking about those placements, is like, and I've actually been kind of like on a similar vein considering this myself. I think that our desire to help and to universalize can be such a hindrance at times to us, where we can feel that sense of like limitation or like take it harshly on ourselves because we do have the desire to help so much. And I at least know for me, when I like thinking about your example, when I find myself in those moments with other people, because I 42 is my Mercury um in Aries as well. Like it's the same thing. But I I get into this space where it's like it's not so much about my worth, and it can present that way first because I think that's how we're programmed to think about it, right? It's like you're programmed to think that if something isn't going right, that it's your fault, that it's all on you, and that everything has to be on you, that you have to be the one to fix it. But what I have come with is like I sometimes I see some of those other people and I see the success that they're having, and my whole open ego can be like, Where's the value? Like, why am I not, getting the clout or the recognition like that?" But what I actually come to realize is that like, no, like I just have such a desire to help, that I see them and I see the reach that they're having, and I wish I had that reach so I had the capacity to universalize in the way that my heart really wants to universalize. But then, like for me as a third line, I come in and get afraid and be like, okay, but like am I going to universalize the right thing? Like, I don't want to confuse people or I don't want to mislead people. Like, hello, also having the 7.5. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very fucking conscious about where I lead people to and how I lead people. And I've talked with my other reflector friend who's also a Sphinx about this as well. And this is like a gate 7 thing that, we can learn from human design and gene keys is like, we see so often people who are put into the spotlight who actually really shouldn't be there. Like they're placed in the spotlight
Mm.
for wrong reasons, right? Like they're glorified, like that 31 then kind of comes in and it's like they have this influence, and there are those of us who are kind of like at this place where like we actually have so much fucking value to offer, but we are so hypercritical of ourselves and are like constantly turning everything on ourselves that we literally stop ourselves from getting out there because we have such a high level of integrity that we like try to make sure that every fucking step we take is the right one, is the perfect one, is the one that actually helps.
Yeah.
But to circle back to the thing that I actually wanted to say to you, and I feel like I've witnessed with what little, because I'm not on social media super often, but with what little I've witnessed so far of your podcast, and what just came to me is like, it's not actually so much about you, so much as you giving the platform to other people. Like you actually magnify and grow your impact by coming together with other people and being able to help their legacy live on. And your legacy is bringing those people together. You know what I mean? Like a part of it, right? Is bringing those people together.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So well put. And you're the first person who has said that to me, honestly, besides my mom. And
What?
my mom's life's work is in gate 57. And anybody listening, if you know anything about human design gates, gate 57 is the gate of intuition. And her incarnation cross is the cross of penetration. So she is so good. She doesn't even realize it. Like she doesn't think she's intuitive at all, which is incredible to me. Like it's funny. I think she has this sense that she is, but she has an undefined spleen center, which means,
Mhm.
Destiny, she doesn't just get like random pings of instinct like people like me do. And so these people can hold just like vast amounts of intuitive wisdom, but they don't realize it.
Mhm.
And so she's told me that she was like, you like are a great platform for other people to grow their stuff. And I was like, that's true. I was like, I don't mind being a stepping stone in that way. That's fine. Because something that's interesting, and I've never said this out loud before, but whenever I meet someone I really like and I love their work, I'm like, one day when I become like huge, because that is the goal, it might not happen, but whatever. If that happens and when, I really want to bring all these people with me. Like that's always been the thing. And that's also very gate 32, because gate 32 is about like you're knowing your teammates and like who should be on your team. That's why when I find someone, I'm like, you have so much good stuff to say. Like you're coming with me.
Yeah, yeah, you're identifying the people who have the drive and who have the ambition and who are not rooted in greed, right? Like that's the shadow. Like, and I've got 54 in my chart 5 fucking times. So
Really?
It's my SQ and it's my both of my Neptune and my Uranus gates.
So
Um,
you're like the Monopoly guy. You're like Mr. Moneybags.
I have so much fucking drive, so much fucking drive, and yet my entire life has been waiting for the person to give me the fucking platform to allow me to utilize my drive
Mm-hmm.
in the correct way. Right. And
Mm.
that's like, yes, that is the beauty of that channel is it's a tribal channel. Like we fucking need each other. We need people like you who can spot people who have the raw drive and ambition, and you have the capacity to know who is worth investing in. Who am I going to help and invest in to, yes, help give them this platform? And it, like when you said that, it makes me think of Annie Richardson. She's a reflector and she has Reflector Reflections podcast, and she's a 5-1 as well. And I think that's what she does so beautifully too. Like the podcast is not about her. The podcast is about reflectors and giving reflectors a platform. And I think she actually, I think you guys have the same incarnation cross. Her design sun is 56. So I don't remember her other side, but I
But her
think you.
design son, yeah, then she would have 32. That means she has the same birthday as me.
No, well, no, because she has 56 as, I mean, sorry, as her personality son.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, as her personality son. So I can't remember if her design side is the same as yours or if it's whatever the other one is.
Yeah.
But it should be that. But yeah, she does the same thing. And like, then I think about like your 56 and like cutting through the dross of like knowing like especially when we talk about like leaders and spiritual people or coaches or mentors or whomever, like there's so much in right. You got in line one. There's so much distracting information out there. People who are trying to be leaders, who are trying to universalize things, who are giving away information that is incredibly distracting, that is very intoxicating, right? That's like, ooh, this person, they're so pretty. The things that they're saying, like it's feeding my ego, it's feeding my whatever. But like you have the capacity to be like, mm-mm. Like this is not actually enriching. Like this is not actually helpful. And we need the information that can create that solid foundational basis to actually be able to house people in this journey of their spiritual material ascension, to help take them out of that place of limitation that they're experience and experience growth, like how the 42 is designed to do, right? The 42 wants to complete things, it wants to experience growth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my take on your chart. There you go.
Thank you. And so much here, right, that I wouldn't see just from human design. And actually, I need to check what 56.1 is with the human design keynotes in particular. Like it might tell me a little bit about distraction through that. But what I read in gene keys about 56, so gate 56, known as the 56 gene keys in this system, that whole thing about distraction, right, is just something that I didn't learn through traditional human design, which I mean you could like kind of make sense of it because it's the gate of stimulation, right? Like, and then that's kind of why like people's gate 56 can tell these rambling stories and they're like they don't really know which stories to tell. They're just like, I have a story, listen.
Oh, I
So
know.
we're
My
kind.
projector daughter has 1156 as her only channel.
Oh my God, really? How
I get it.
fascinating. What an interesting mental projector. That is like, that's almost as like weird as what someone with just 4323 would be like. Like I can
Huh.
not imagine life as a mental projector with just that channel.
I don't
But
think she can.
1156 is unique as well. But that whole thing, right? That whole thing about 56, knowing like which of these things is true stimulation and which of these is just distraction, that
Mhm.
came from gene keys for me. That didn't come from human design. So although knowing this whole thing about like storytelling and knowing that I am a natural storyteller, and that is actually, and that being my radiance, like not always knowing that that's a thing that attracts people to me, that was really, really helpful. And in fact, in my gates and channels course, like some of the stuff, it's actually like coming from gene keys. It's not coming from human design. Cause I was like, this is positive and influential and helpful. Um, but anyway, if somebody, we're starting off with gene keys and they're like, holy crap, I am so experiencing the shadow of this, right? I can see it. And that is the first step. But I want to start moving forward with this.
Mhm.
What is a piece of advice that you'd have for them to get started with that?
So this is where I would actually pull in wisdom from the 33rd gene key, which is the gate of mindfulness. or in human design, it's retreat. And in gene keys, it's considered a stop codon. And all of these gene keys, like all of the gates, why it's called the gene keys is because it ties into your genetic coding. And what 33 is it's considered a stop codon. And so it literally is here to stop patterns, to like stop your DNA from replicating a certain pattern. And there's 3 different stop codons, and 56 is one of them, actually. So within the 33rd gene key, this one really talks about like it's the journey of mindfulness. It's a journey from forgetting to mindfulness to revelation. And I have this in my True Siddhis profile. We haven't talked about this, cough cough, but I have this as my culture in my True Siddhis profile, and it's been one of the gates that I fucking love so much, and I take so much wisdom from, and I have seen in my life so much in terms of this like this mindfulness. And this is really about like a journey of breaking our patterns, of breaking the patterns of wounding in our life. And so what I would express to somebody is like, okay, if you're wanting to work with this and you see yourself so much in the shadow, a part of the process and the very, very, very first step is simply recognition, right? Breaking ourselves out of that state of forgetting, which is where we literally aren't even aware that there is some wounding and some pattern playing out. And so even reading the gene keys and simply becoming aware that you're in a shadow, becoming aware that there's a gift, becoming aware that there's something else, becoming aware that you're not doomed, that you're not a bad person, that you're not a failure, that you're not whatever, that this is simply the raw material, right? And that you've now become aware of it. That is the first step. And if you just leave it there for a little bit, you can be okay. And so what I would say is like, if it feels overwhelming to attempt to move into it and you don't want to come get a dope ass reading from me or somebody else to help you along with that, is to just start to be aware of these patterns playing out in your life. You know, if journaling feels good, journal about it. Like, oh my God, today, like I recognize this fucking shadow came up and this is what happened, right? Just simply becoming mindful, becoming aware and recognizing what are even the things, like even if you haven't read a gene key, like one of the things that you can do is like, okay, what in my life is causing me pain? Where am I experiencing pain and friction and resistance? And noticing what those are and making note, like I said, whether it's just mentally like I do, or like journaling about it, writing it down of like, here are my trigger points. Where am I being triggered? And just watching and becoming aware of that. Because the more you become aware of something, slowly but surely you unwind literally the wound, that like how you're like she's wound up so tight, right? Like that kind of saying, like that's where it comes from. And so the more you become aware of it, the more you become aware of even the pain and the frustration and the resistance that it's causing you, the more you actually kind of like give yourself, your heart, your energy space. Like you literally create space, and more light can come in, more love can come in. Right now there's more of a contrast. Now it's not just this friction and this pain. Now it's, oh, I have the pain and now I have something else. And that something else starts out as just awareness that I don't like this. This isn't serving me, and there can be something more.
Mm.
So I would start there. And so if you then do want to move into it and you're a self-study person, I would suggest, having the Gene Keys book. And then if you actually want to dive in, I personally suggest the Gene Keys pathway books over the courses online. And I say that with the utmost love and respect for Richard Rudd, but I personally, and even have heard from a few other people, I personally did not find them super helpful. I found my own personal studies with the Gene Keys book and the pathway books to be the most practical and helpful for me. So if you want to do that and you're a self-study person, I would get that, and I would dive into your sequences. If you're having a hard time with relationships, especially, like you can look at the Venus sequence. But I always tell people, like, if you want to go straight to the fucking core, a lot of the times you can just read like your personality sun, your life's work, and your core wound. Like if you want just like two to just go right into the core, read those two. If you don't want to like move through the whole pathway yet, just read those two and see what comes up.
I think all of that is incredible advice because first off, just looking at my life's work and my core wound slash vocation, those both explain like some of the top two things in my
Uh-huh.
life.
So often the key words that he selected for the shadow, the gift, and the city, they're very precise words, like especially the shadow and the gift ones. The city ones can be a little like but especially the shadow and the gift, right? And so if you're going like, okay, my life's work is failure, you don't even necessarily need to read the gene keys. Just start contemplating when you sound the word failure in your mind, in your heart, in your life, in your awareness, what does that word bring up for you?
Mhm.
And start there. So that's another really good point with this is like if you do read the gene keys and you're like, I'm sorry, what the fuck did you just say, Richard? Just be like, okay, completely disregard that and just look at the word. Maybe even Google the word and see like what is the definition of this word? What are other words that can describe this same thing? Because like I've done that with some of the keywords that human design uses, and I'll Google them and I'll be like, oh shit, like this definition like actually makes sense. And then there's other words in here, and then it can like just bring more information and bring a different perspective to it. So yeah, that's how I would suggest starting it. And then of course, I also highly suggest getting a reading from, especially reflector teachers that have
I highly
other.
recommend it too. We kind of already talked about how Gene Keys filled in this gap for you. When it came to your clients, like if you had a common theme that you heard from them about like what Gene Keys was giving them and what it was clarifying for them, reflector or not, right? Because most of the people you're probably working with are not reflectors. Um,
Most actually are.
yeah, actually they are. Oh, that makes sense because you are one, right? You know what's really funny is the number one energy type that reaches out to me online is reflectors, which is
Whoa.
so weird to me because I'm like, but you're not, you guys barely exist. You're like barely here. But when they come to you, like what is the thing that they most say they get out of this that they didn't really with human design? Maybe it's the same as it was for you as a reflector.
I would say the number one thing is a sense of deep acknowledgement
Mhm.
and relief through being seen. And I do work primarily with reflectors. I have worked with other types over the years. But I would say 90 to 95% of my clientele over hundreds of readings over the last few years have been reflectors. And specifically bringing in the gene keys really always warrants a like mind blown, emoji that happens on their face every single time when they're like, what? Like basically what my reaction was like, what the fuck? How do you know this about me? And also that there is this deep sense of like peace and relief because it does give you so much more, right? It doesn't tell you that you're a bad person. It doesn't tell you that you're doomed and that you're fucked. And to be quite honest, I've had a lot of clients come to me from human design specific readers who are big name readers actually. 'Cause I'm a heretic, I have to say that. Who have
I'm
literally who
legally
have
obligated to say that.
obligated to say this, like people who have literally told them that they're fucked, like actually said
Really?
this. Yes, like actually said this to people.
Oh my
And so
God.
that's why I'm a heretic and that's why I don't follow any of the fucking rules in it. And that's also why I love the gene keys because like I said, it's like it's not telling you that you're fucked. It's not telling you that you're a bad person. It's literally giving you the whole fucking spectrum. It's showing you that there is a higher purpose, hello gate 2, that there is a higher purpose to all of it. And so that's really where it comes through. And so I also noticed like one of the benefits too that I hadn't said before that came online very unsurprisingly to me, was that Gene Keys gave me the language to describe the energy that I had always felt. So when I'm
Mhm.
picking up on somebody else's energy in my body, as a reflector, as an intuitive, whatever, it's giving me a language to understand that. like there's a specific resonance. Like I can hear the language, it talks to me, or I can feel it. And I'm like, oh, I know what this is now. And I know how to navigate it. So like it helps me as a mentor, it helps me as a coach, it helps me as a psychic in that way. It helps me to even like understand life. And like I said, the transits in that way. And so when I've described that to reflectors, and I even have a very heretical post on my Instagram that basically says like, stop fucking telling reflectors to follow the lunar cycle. And this is why. And this is a part of the reason why I say it, because like for me at least, and I know this is not the case for all reflectors, but for me, it's like following that lunar cycle would literally wouldn't mean shit if I didn't know the actual gates and the energies and what was being, offered up by the transits at any given time.
You mean besides the gates that the moon is moving through?
Yeah, because it's all
Okay.
of them.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And
Yeah.
what a powerful tool then for reflectors. And can I ask you something a little off topic? Because I've never actually asked a reflector this from their personal experience. Now that you know that you're a reflector, and you have these tools to label those energies more through Gene Keys. Like when I get on this Zoom call with you, or when like somebody else walks into the room or you're around that person, is it a lot easier for you to actually identify literally like in the moment, like, oh, that's me or that's not me? Like when I popped on, were you like, I sense a different energy here now? I mean, because like we all do as humans, right? Especially if you have undefined centers. But I've always been so curious about that from a reflector perspective.
It's funny that you say that, because something happened in my personal life just before the call that I was like, I wonder if we're gonna end up talking about this. And here we are. It's really, it's a lot easier when it's a stranger, when it's not somebody that I'm around 24/7. When I'm around somebody 24/7, certainly like my partner, for example, who is an 8 out of 9 defined projector, and we are 9 and 0 together, it's really fucking difficult actually to know what is mine and what is not mine, in a sense of like, because here's the thing. One of the aspects that I have heard people talk about with reflectors is like, none of it is you. You have no self. You are not there. You are only there when you're activated by the transit or somebody else, which is bullshit. But there is this constant dance, and I also have gate 10. So like I'm constantly dancing with the like, is this mine? Is it not? Do I need to take responsibility for this or do I not? And I do think that for reflectors, like one of the things that like I just fucking just had thrown in my face so loudly with this interaction with my partner was like, holy shit, like I have like I think because I have that gate 10 too, and just life past circumstances in general, like I try really hard to make sure that I take responsibility for the things that I need to take care of, and like, do my own personal inner work, right? Because I don't ever want to be projecting onto somebody else. I don't ever want to be blaming somebody else or manipulating somebody else, especially given the power that we have as reflectors, right? With seeing people and feeling people and knowing shit about people that they don't even themselves know or are conscious of. Like there's a huge power there, right? And so I try to be really respectful and conscientious at how I wield that, and really ask myself, like, is this mine? Is it not mine? And I think one of the tricky things is that we have to understand as reflectors, like all of those gates, I have all of those energies. Like those are my energies just as much as they are the filtration system for me to experience other people in my life that are coming around me, right? Like all of those energies in my G center, like those all make up who I am and what my identity is. It just doesn't express itself in a solid, tangible, always fixed way. But those are me, right? I am all of those gates. And so when we come into contact with other people, like it is my belief that reflectors are just the walking, talking, embodying mirrors that project out whatever energy, the gates that we have. Like that's the story. That is the energy that we are here to be a living, embodying mirror of. And then we also get to be that mirror specifically in practical ways to help other people. Like we will attract people who need to have mirrored the energy within them that we share with them. Right. So I think that there's always this like tether, this likeness when we attract people. And I think that's kind of just like a universal cosmic fucking law. So there is like that aspect of it of like, okay, I'm dealing with constriction myself, and I've done all of this work around trying to open my heart and trying to be loving and accepting. And then I get into a conversation with my partner where I tell him this really hard truth about what I'm feeling, and what I'm also being like, I think actually I'm coming to the realization right now that some of this actually isn't fucking mine, that I've been taking this on and thinking this is mine and feeling bad and feeling guilty for it. And I'm realizing in this moment that I think a lot of this is actually fucking you. And so I need you to take responsibility for it. And like in this moment, I'm having all of the posts that I've ever seen talking about what to do when you're in a relationship with a reflector, right? Where they say, like, take responsibility for yourself, do the inner work, be honest with yourself, like all of those things that I've like taken in and I've agreed with, while at the same time tried to be like, yes, and I want to make sure that I take responsibility, because I don't ever want to just project that like this is never me, it's always you, because that's not the case. But then I have real life example where I'm like, fuck, I think in a lot of cases it is actually the case. Especially when we're working with other energy types. Like, and this is why I like working with reflectors so much, is because it's so like the energy between like reflector and reflector is so much more clean. Like
Mm.
I can get on a call with another reflector and I'm like, yes, I sense your energy. Yes, we have electromagnetics that are going in my body that I can feel, but there is this like cleanliness, this like softness of the experience. Whereas when I get into contact with an energy type, like you fill me up in a way that other people are not going to. And like I become you, but I don't necessarily always know that I become you unless I'm really fucking tuned in and I can like create that distance. And so with somebody that we live with 24/7, it gets really fucking difficult to figure out and to sparse out what is mine and what is yours.
Yeah. But like for someone like me or a client or something like that, if they come into the situation, a
Yes.
lot easier. I mean, I don't
Oh,
want to say
100%.
it's necessarily more jarring, but
Yeah.
it's distinct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier. But I also like I will pick up on somebody's energy potentially hours. It used to be like sometimes a month in advance. Like the moment a client would book a session with me, would pay me, like once that money, once that energy was exchanged, I could unknowingly be picking up and literally living out their energy, which is also a part of the 2.3 life's work that I have. It's like the teacher that never stops being the student. And so
Mm.
one of the things that I've surprisingly stumbled upon is that like everybody who comes into my awareness as a client, or as a friend even, it's like we have these similar stories, these similar things that have been happening in our lives that we're working through. And it tends to be like I live out whatever it is that I need to come into awareness on to then be able to help them. So it's like a this and thing. Like, yes, I experience your energy, and it's most easy like when you get talking. So when I have a client or somebody who doesn't really talk, who isn't really getting honest, it's really hard
Mm.
sometimes to like make that distinction, because the moment I start talking about how I'm feeling or you start talking about how you feeling, like it creates this movement of energy, and then I can go, oh, yeah, I can see, or I can hear this, and I can now be like, okay, yep, that's yours, okay, yep, that's mine. But when there isn't that energetic exchange, when the other person, like I feel like there can be this essence of like the other types can be like closed in a way where they're not letting me, and they're not like fully stepping in front of the mirror. So I can feel it, but it might not necessarily come out as cleanly and as clearly as it would if like you truly step in front of the mirror and you're like, okay, like I'm willing to be seen. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, we'll get back to Gene Keys in a second here, but I just wanted to say, like, I can imagine that having someone not talk that much in a session or not respond that much, if you're feeling that energy and it's like, I'm pretty sure this is you, but I'm not sure, and the other person won't validate that,
Uh-huh.
how invalidating that can be,
Mhm.
and leave so many
Mhm.
reflectors out in the world being like, well, I guess it's just me, when no, it's not you. It's because
Yeah.
people around themselves can't see their patterns. And I'm sure I'm a generator. Like I get my head stuck in my ass all the time, you know? Like I'm sure it's true. Um, like I'm sure that I get in that a lot, but yeah, it's hard it's hard, I think, to help people when you see a pattern in them that they don't see, and it's like so obvious to you and you want to reflect it back, which especially as a heretic reflector, I'm sure could lead you to feel like even more of a heretic. But
I would like to ask you, spin
yeah.
the tables. What is it
Ooh,
like to work
to
with a
have my
reflector?
head up my ass.
To have your head up your ass. No, what is it like to be in aura with, or like, even like in this type of aura? What has it been like for you with reflectors? And like, how do you feel around us? I mean, even how did you feel in my session? Like, I actually can't remember because it's been a while now. I'm like, I don't remember.
Yeah,
Was she dodging me? Was she being super open? I don't remember.
I
But I'm
hope.
just curious, yeah, like what it's like for you on the other end to, even especially as a teacher, because I find that so many people in this space are teaching information about us and about, our value to the other types. And I don't
Yeah.
think that everybody really fully actually accepts that and is open to it. So
Yeah.
I'm curious what it is like from your angle as just an individual and as also a teacher and somebody receiving a reflector's guidance or wisdom.
Wow. I mean, I think my experiences with reflectors so far have been as faceted as the energy type is described to be, or that we should expect them to be. But I have, like, I'm sure I've met reflectors I haven't liked or vibed with, because there are lots of people whose charts I don't know out in the world. So I could have come across them as been like, ooh. But for the most part, I've had such fantastic experiences with reflectors. But the big thing for me, and I tell all of my reflector friends this, I was just voxing with a friend who is a reflector, is that as somebody who creates all this energy, and I don't create identity energy because I have an undefined G center, but I do, create stress, and like life force, productivity, and then instinctual fear energy for myself. That being said, like I feel a big responsibility, and like I always have with my reflector pals, to make sure that I'm not doing exactly what you were saying, which is like not projecting everything I am onto you and then becoming disappointed when you don't show up the way that I wanted you to. So I told you about an experience that I had with a reflector who reflected something back to me, and I was like, what? Like I to this day don't resonate with it. And it's okay. Like it didn't offend me, but I realized what bothered me was like it's because I had been seeing her one way, and then she showed up with this completely other way because it was a different day and she was a different human and I've been seeing different parts of her. And I was like, oh, we have such different views in life. We
Mhm.
have very different personalities. And it was this moment where I was like, well, whose fault is it for like not accepting that this person could have shown up differently? That's a big thing that you need from reflectors. But in terms of like my experience of like your guys' energy, what's so interesting is it's kind of like what you were talking about, it calibrates as we spend more time together. So when I meet a reflector, to be honest, it's kind of like this like misty white fog around you guys. And I have a really hard time reading you at first. And then it's sort of like your aura is like, and got it. Okay, we're on this level. This is what it is. This is what's going on. And I'm like, okay, now we can kind of understand each other more, which is like probably you guys just turning into me for a little bit, or like tuning into my frequency and getting on that frequency, for my sake, so I
You
can
want to you want to know what
understand
I
you.
think it is?
What?
What I think you just described, because me and two reflector girlfriends have talked about this quite often. And one of those girlfriends, her mother is also a reflector.
Whoa.
And so she talked about this is, something that she noticed with how she's raised. Um, and there's other like I have the gate of empathy and sensitivity, right? So we can like go into like other dynamics, or I'm sure open G center people can sometimes do this, or open spleen centered people can sometimes do this. But a theme that I've noticed talking to other reflectors is what I think you just described is like what is happening of this like it's that scanning, it's that diagnostics. When we first meet somebody, like it's like, you know, the whole like why we're told we need to wait through a lunar cycle is like, really, I need to experience you throughout a month or, you know, a longer period of time to really understand how you are, to understand how I need to. And I think this can be a level of like adaptive survival. But it's also, I think, just a part of like our inherent energy and a gift in the sense of like, I need to assess you. I need to scan you and to figure out what's going on with you so I understand like, okay, yes, what is mine, what is not mine, but also like how do I show up in relationship to you. It is very like tactical in that way, right? Where it's like you go into a new environment, because we talked about this like literally with environments more so than people, but like you go into a new environment and like you stop and you scan and you wait and you stay back and you observe to understand like, okay, what's going on in this environment? Are there threats here? What, you know, where are the benefits? Like all of that kind of stuff. Like there is so much information that we are taking in and assessing that we have to kind of like parse through before we can be like, okay, and I'm now showing up and I'm now like embodying an actual human being that can like be in interaction with you because it is so different every single person we're around and every single environment that we're in. Like we do shapeshift and meld to a degree where like I'm always me showing up in front of everybody, but how much of me, what version of me to like to that, to the extent of how much of me can I be in this expression with you, and how much can I mirror to you in a way that is safe and or even respectful to you, right? Because
Mhm.
I have to make sure that I don't accidentally just like spew some shit from my mouth that ends up being like, oh, I'm sorry, what did you just say to me? Like, what information did you just give to me? And then I just like blew your whole world apart. So,
Yeah. Didn't you say, I feel like it was on Annie's podcast that you were saying that like your partner or someone said to you, like, sometimes people aren't ready. You can't
uh-huh.
tell them that they're not ready to hear that. And I thought that was so funny. I feel
Yeah.
that way a little bit sometimes as a 5-1, but I mean, I'm just not going to be as tuned in as a reflector. I do have a lot of centers undefined, but it's never going to be the same thing. And the other thing you asked me that I didn't answer, by the way, was how do I feel about this as a teacher? I feel like that forever student with reflectors. And I am always so over the moon excited to hear these perspectives from people like you because they give me so much more information for how I can help reflectors, especially since for some reason you guys seem to reach out to me, which I love. Like I love you guys. I love knowing that an article helped you or a video helped you or something like that. But I just feel like every person has such a nuanced experience of life, such a nuanced experience of a certain aspect that they have in their design, whether that be energy type, profile line, gate, center definition, whatever. And it's no matter what we do, reflectors are still rather underserved. So for me, the more I can hear this stuff from people who understand human design and are human design literate, Gene Keys literate, the better. And the more I can hear from like 3-line reflectors as well, because you guys have this gift of being like so candid and open in this way that I really respect. Like I was just talking to another 3-5 reflector about how we've both been going through kind of the same thing of like feeling like we've been in a creative void. And the way that she was talking about how her business is unfolding differently from how she expected and how she was like, and then I realized, well, it's supposed to. I'm a reflector and we're supposed to be surprised. I was like, I've never thought of it that way, you know? And so what you guys go through and sharing that, it's such an incredible thing. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it's such a gift to us. And like I will just again be a heretic and say like we can tell, and I think the reason why, you know, probably one of the many reasons why so many reflectors are reaching out to you in this sense is because we have a very keen eye um in the space, the community of human design and teachers, of like who is grounded and who is healthy and who is not, who is open to us and who is not. And there's so many people who come from a place of like that dogma with human design where, you know, it's like it's so much of like this is the not self. Like I've experienced people literally being like, oh, you can't talk about this thing you're doing because you're trying to prove your value, or you haven't been asked or whatever. Like there are people who legitimately try to fucking cram us down so small and tell us that like we can't do all these things. And we're like, but actually we can, and we're living fucking proof of it. And if you would just shut the hell up for a second and listen to us, we could tell you. So the fact that you are somebody who is willing to actually listen and learn from a reflector holds so much fucking weight and value for us that I can say with certainty from everybody in the reflector community, I can be their spokesleader, right? Their spokesperson right now and say, that is going to win you. Like that is going to win you reflector respect and clients. And also it's just, we're just so fucking grateful because we have so much wisdom and knowledge on so many things, but specifically around what it's like to be a reflector.
Yeah, seriously.
And everyone's like, we don't understand you. And we're like, well, sit down, shut the fuck up, grab your tea and take a listen. And like, you'll understand. Like, it's not that difficult.
Yeah. To those people, I'm like, what you scared of? What you are scared of? Like, I really do feel like, we always talk about people being afraid of,
Thank you. That was the heretic thing that I was actually going to say that I forgot to say in my little ramble was yes, we can tell the teachers who are just so fucking afraid of seeing themselves and seeing the truth that they just push reflectors away as a byproduct because it's like they know. Like they're literally told that's who and what we are. But instead they're like, no, you're Agent Smith. You're bad. You're evil. Get away from
Agent Smith. Definitely. And, Destiny is, similar to me. She's going to be the kind of, she'll explain if you want, she'll explain anything you want, but she is a problem solver and, she is a way shower. So these are the things she's really good at with using Gene Key's sidereal human design and human design to do.
Yeah.
I just thought I would say that because I know that that's something that you like to do rather than just like information vomiting on people, which is what I tend to do and is why I don't give readings as often. Not that I don't love my clients, but I'm just like, I'm more of a teacher, Yeah.
Which makes sense. And yeah, that's why like too, I mean, I don't, it's funny, like I don't have a lot of like explanation typically about my readings before somebody books. Like it's just like they trust me, they're drawn to me. It's a yes for them.
Yeah.
But that's what I always tell them at the beginning is like, look, this is going to be a conversation and this isn't so you end up just talking the whole time and I go, haha, you paid me to talk. Like, because most of the time it's not that. Sometimes it can be because sometimes people just need to fucking talk and I'll listen. I do have the gate of the listener.
Yeah.
But most of it is like, because I have found through my 3-5 journey, like when we're working with these systems, whether it's Gene Keys or human design, it's not practical to try to just go and like read every single fucking placement and dive into all the information. Like it's just not, at least from my experience, it's not practical. And so finding somebody, a reader, a person who can help guide you to even like, if you want to be like, hey, I don't necessarily want a reading, I want to do digging myself. Like I'll just come to me and I'll fucking help you. And I'll say, okay, tell me what you're going through. What do you want to know? Okay, go look at these placements. And then you can go down your own rabbit hole, or that's what we'll do in a session because that's just so much more helpful than trying to just cram a bunch of shit in your mind that isn't actually going to beget any level of personal awareness and understanding and growth.
Beautifully put.
So,
well, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for all your reflector wisdom. And I can't wait to have you back on to talk about true sidereal.
yes, to spill the tea. To spill the tea.
Absolutely. That's going to be a spicy one.
Yes, it
is. Destiny has stories and personal history to share.
I do.
Anyway, you already know you rock. Everyone listening, you rock, and I will talk to you next time.